When he was younger, when Naofumi Iwatani was younger, he was told all the time that gaming would get him nowhere. Nowhere at all. He was told that if he continued down this path of just gaming his life away, he would do just that. Game his life away. It would be gone. Any potential he ever had in his life would be gone. But fortunately enough, Naofumi was able to make a living off of gaming. Gaming alone. He became a YouTuber, became a pro gamer, would fight and play at the highest stage of them all. Anything you can think of, he was pro in. He was one of the best gamers, if not the best gamer, alive. Naofumi went from controller to PC to anything you can think of. From Call of Duty to Valorant to CSGO. Any video games that you can think of, stuff like Halo, Mortal Kombat, even Super Smash Bros. Naofumi was good at it all. He was pro at all of it. He would just jump from game to game, and whatever game he would go into, it's like he was building up a nation. A Naofumi nation. A nation of people that cheered him on and loved to watch him game. Naofumi knew what he wanted to do in his life, and that was to become a pro gamer. But what he didn't know is that when he would look at his final screen, he would look at that screen after finally beating his arch rival, he would see something different. Text would show up after he just won his final match against him, and he'd see text that read something far different, saying that he was the legendary gamer hero. But Naofumi was confused. Was this a custom text? Was this some custom thing that they were doing? He looked around and began to try and ask people, but it seems like everyone around him was gone. Everything around him was completely disappeared, as if it was just a flash of light. Gone in an instant. Naofumi Iwatani would follow right after it, and he would disappear into nothingness and reappear in some odd-looking room. When he looked to his left, he saw 3 people with various weapons. A sword, a spear, and a bow. He looked at his hands, and he saw a controller, and he felt on his neck a headset. Naofumi was in complete shock. As he continues to stare in awe, multiple people run down to greet the 4 brand new heroes. Naofumi would question what's going on as these knights approach him and say that the king wants to speak with all 4 of them. The other 3 of them look at Naofumi in shock. He doesn't have a weapon. What would this even mean? It looks like he has a controller. They obviously know that he's some sort of gamer and asks about it and Naofumi is confused. You don't know who I am? They're confused. Are we supposed to? Motoyasu says kind of oddly. I mean, no, I guess not. But most people know me, especially if you know video games. Are you guys gamers? They say they are, hardcore gamers at that, and Naofumi says he's the #1 professional in the world. But they immediately say that's not the case. It's not Naofumi, it's this guy or this guy or this guy. And they're all shocked, but they don't have enough time to talk about it, so they head to the king. The king explains exactly where they are and why they are here, to protect them from the waves. The waves are this catastrophe that have been running rampant on top of all of them, and they need all 4 of their help. They look at Naofumi though, or the king does, and is confused. Who is this guy? Well, he has no weapon. He must be some random dude. And he tells the random dude just to scurry off, that there's no reason for him to be here, but Naofumi says that's not the case. He was summoned here as well. The other 3 heroes say that as well, but the knights refuse to believe the sentiments and begin pushing him out. It's as if they're not wanting him here for the reason that he doesn't have a weapon. The other 3 heroes are shocked, but after being basically bribed with more and more money, they don't really say a word. Naofumi just doesn't really know what to think. He's kind of scared. He's never been on his own like this in a long time. Frankly, he's always been kind of sheltered by his mother, his father, and people like that. They gave him this chance to be this big success, and frankly, he's never really left home. That might sound sad, but my man's is rich. He's just really sharing the wealth with his family, and he's just in a comfortable spot. Nonetheless, Naofumi does find a lot of struggles walking around the city as people actually introduce themselves. They think that Naofumi's a good-looking dude, and they get this nice-looking aroma off of him, as if he's obviously a good guy. Naofumi begins to wonder what all of this statistical thing is about, learning that this game is similar to some others he's actually played in the past. Trying to figure out every single aspect of it, he does pick it up relatively quickly. The only problem he's currently having is money. So he actually does begin to scour, maybe grab some plants and sell them, just so he can see what that money looks like. He wants to know if maybe, just maybe, there's some money that he could actually replicate in this world and maybe mass produce it, or maybe make money in a different way, because he assumes that his power must be some sort of video gaming. He begins to mess with his controller until he presses the odd looking button in the middle, and when he does, it actually shows up a holographic screen that only he can see. This holographic screen has a multitude of games, but it seems like he can only choose about 1 or 2 of them every couple 5 to 10 levels, so it kind of makes it rough. What does he choose? What is he supposed to choose? Until he realizes, he looks at the money that he uses in this world. So what kind of money should basically be able to replicate, at least similar to that type of money? He's looking at it closely, and then he realizes almost every MMORPG that he's ever played has that type of money. We're talking about World of Warcraft and stuff like that. Most of those games have that type of money, and he has the best ways to make that money. So if he can play video games in this world, it must have something to do with real life. So he begins to basically mess around with unlocking World of Warcraft, but also unlocking one more other game. And that's actually Minecraft, ironically enough. He decides to unlock this game because he felt that, well, it'd probably be the best choice for at least starting out. He has one that can probably give him some weaponry, or at least some decent armor, if that is how his weapon works, quote unquote. And then he has Minecraft, which will allow him to basically make structures and get things set up relatively easier for himself. So he begins messing with these games, playing them literally on a holographic screen, and eventually he's actually able to drag those games out. It seems kind of odd. His level doesn't really go up much while he's doing this, but maybe he can enact some of these, you could say, games or weapons upon this world that he's in right now. So he starts messing with Minecraft, eventually getting armor and a diamond sword, and eventually just goes out and starts swinging at random things, basically swinging at monsters and stuff like that, killing a couple over and over. He's pretty shocked to see this, but his levels seem to be increasing at a rapid rate. It seems that once he's enacting the games that he's been playing in this world, seem to be gaining him a decent amount of experience points. So he continues on. He does basically all that for about one night, and then builds himself a little shack of some sorts, but it expands to be a bigger place, definitely by the end of the day, and he has his own little home. He actually builds it outside of a nearby village, and he actually pays them a little bit of cash so he can do so. This village is called Loot Village. It seems that he stumbled across it while he was just exploring, trying to get a lay of the land, and he just made this small house next to them. They offered that he could rent from them for really cheap, but he says that it's fine, that he can make his own place, and if more people join and come here, maybe he can even build more houses for them as a debt to basically pay them off. And they say that's fine, that he already pays the amount that they already set, but he says that he really doesn't mind in terms of helping people out. Like I said, Naofumi is still this nice, good-looking dude. He's not really mean by any means, and frankly, yeah, he might have got kicked out of the kingdom, but he had no attachment to the kingdom at all. Like, he wasn't really intertwined over there at all, and he barely learned that he was some hero. So yeah, he's learning about this world, but he's still kind of living a sort of normal life. He continues on leveling up, eventually getting to level 10, and he starts unlocking more and more games. Unlocking games like Halo, games like Mortal Kombat, stuff like this, where it seems that he's actually going to be able to gain physical people to come out and basically fight for him. That's kind of like his party. This would give him a chance to basically level up even faster, killing tons and tons of monsters, and eventually he would reach level 20 in a matter of about a week or so. Money, straight up, is not a problem. He hasn't found a problem in terms of money at all, and he's been making a ton of it through other games that he has as well. And then he would also bring in maybe proper memorabilia and and materials from various games and bring them into his world, sell them off, and it would be a ton of money he's making off of that. So money, like I said, wouldn't be a problem by any means. Protection is the main issue, and eventually he would get that protection. He was a pro in terms of Mortal Kombat and stuff like that, and he played competitively a lot, even in Halo, so he knows a lot of the ups and downs in certain characters. But nonetheless, some of these characters like Sub-Zero, Scorpion, if they're under his control, they're going to be super powerful and super strong. But it seems like their level is at a level of 1, so the more he uses them to basically using his controller and basically having them fight on their own, it seems that they're gaining levels too. But he is limited in terms of how many that he has out. He can only have about 1 or 2 characters per game, depending on his level. Like right now, he can't really bring out a ton of characters because he's such a low level. Yeah, he might be level 20, but in the grand scheme of things, those characters that he's bringing out aren't a high level, and it all basically stacks and multiplies on top of each other. So it kind of divides his levels within multiple games, and at least that's what he realizes, and there's a bunch of subcategories in terms of every single game he has. Nonetheless, after the day finishes up, Naofumi begins to basically just, go to sleep, wake up the next morning, blah blah blah, same old, and he eventually heads back into the kingdom to maybe find some other materials and things like that he wouldn't normally have. And a man actually heard of Naofumi, about how rich Naofumi currently is, but he's kept it pretty much under the radar. So this man that is actually running this slave market of some sorts invites Naofumi in. Naofumi isn't so sure about this, but when he enters, he sees that there are a ton of slaves there. And he gets this weird feeling in the pit of his stomach, like it's disgusting him, like it makes it feel gross. Bunch of slaves here, this is horrible. Naofumi walks up to all of them, and most of them, if not all of them, are very calm around Naofumi, and it seems like they're not too overly aggressive by any means. But eventually Naofumi decides that he's just gonna straight up buy all of them. Yeah, buy all of them, because he kind of has infinite money, more or less, at this point. But he just buys all of the slaves that are there to more or less just free them all up. In which the slave market owner is kind of shocked, but he'll take the money how he can get it, and he even gives him a slight discount for buying all of them at one time. Taking basically just all of the slaves there, bringing them to Loot Village, and explaining all of their roles in terms of the village, in terms of protecting the village, in terms of the waves, blah blah blah. And that eventually he'll spread them out and they can kind of live on and do whatever they want. Since none of them have slave crests, they don't necessarily need to listen to Naofumi, and the highest level one is the only one that's a little you could say, not as much fond of Naofumi. But nonetheless, as Naofumi levels up, more and more of them will grow fond of him. And a couple of them are actually pretty fond of him. A smaller dog of some sorts, and then also a little girl by the name of Raftalia, one that is pretty sick. Naofumi is able to get basically this easy potion that more or less just cures her immediately, and that cold that she had goes away. Naofumi questions why she would want to even associate with him, more or less fight alongside of him, and she says that he saved everybody, so she feels like she owes him that. But Naofumi shakes his head, saying that there is no owe. She doesn't owe anybody at all, and that she can live here peacefully if she so chooses. But she also says that the waves do exist, and that she wants to be able to live. She wants to be able to fight alongside everybody else and make sure everybody else is safe as well. Naofumi's impressed. He's intrigued at the idea that Raftalia just presented and says that, sure, why not? He's going to get her some weaponry in which he can actually create himself, ironically enough, and gives her that said weaponry. A simple katana and some simple armor from various games. You can even think of Mortal Kombat. There's tons of armors that he can do there. World of Warcraft and stuff like that. So she has some pretty good armor that is perfectly tailored to her, and frankly, she just needs to learn how to use it. So he begins to basically set up training dummies and anything he can possibly think of, and even spawn in monsters himself, just simple ones that are basically going to more or less spar with her and not try to actually kill her. And then once he feels that she's ready, they'll go out and start fighting other things. And that happens after about a week. After that week passes, they can finally go out, start slashing through actual monsters, and Raftalia gets a lot more accustomed to killing things. That fear of blood would slowly but surely go away, and Naofumi would just embrace all of them. Every person that was, or every person, animal, monster that was a slave, Naofumi would just take care of them, make sure that they're all good to go, and if they really wanted to fight with them, they could. But frankly, it was more for the benefit of Loot Village, protecting that village as much as possible. That is basically his home base at this moment. So Naofumi continues on for the next, obviously, about 3 more weeks or so, and he just continues leveling up, and frankly, it's actually relatively easy with some of these people that he has in terms of video games. He has strong figures like Scorpion, like Master Chief, that more or less just fight for him. And then he can fight for himself as well, summoning in blasters or different weaponry that he can personally use. But in terms of himself, he mostly just lets his other gamer-like characters fight for him. And he finds this to be extremely beneficial, eventually getting to about a level of 38, and Rautalia about a level of about 21. Naofumi, obviously being 10 levels higher now, he has 2 more games to choose from, and there are some extremely powerful games he can choose from, in which he chooses games like Xenoverse, or aka like Dragon Ball Z like games, and those two would just, those games would make him extremely more powerful, being able to have more and more leveling stats like World of Warcraft has and like how Xenoverse has, and on top of more and more powers that he can just put within himself and not just everybody else, makes him extremely overpowered. Of course, like I said, there are limitations to this because there's going to be level subcategories for each one. So yes, he may have those levels on that Xenoverse and it would make him like a Dragon Ball character, but he's extremely weak in terms of that category because he's never really trained with it by any means, and on top of that, it takes time in that game to even level up and get attributes, and there are no quests in this world that he can really replicate until at least a higher level that he's going to be. So of course there's a big boost in power, which would make the first wave, let's be honest, a bit of a wash. But nonetheless, that first wave would come after they go check out the Dragon Hourglass. Him and Rautalia are really the only ones that go because she's the one that looks the most humanoid, and she's approaching more of that adulthood stage where she just looks like a normal human being, but you know, with that raccoon tail and little ears. But they check the Dragon Hourglass to see that it's actually not too long before the next wave, 24 hours in fact, and they're approached by Motoyasu and the other 2 heroes, Itsuki and Ren. They begin to ask how Naofumi has been, and Naofumi says that he's been just fine. He's been kind of just on his own. They apologize for kind of abandoning him, and he says that he never really took it that way, but he says that it's truly fine. He's found his own little home, his own home base, and if he's truly one of the heroes and it wasn't a mistake, he should be able to keep up with them at least. They say that they can only hope so because based on what they would know about a gamer-like hero, he must be extremely strong, or at least strong if he just knew how to level up properly. Naofumi says that he should know how to level up properly, and he thinks he understands how, and to not worry about him, that just to worry about the task at hand. They all nod, and since they don't really have a beef with Naofumi by any means, they wish him good luck, and they wish each other good luck, and they head off once again. Naofumi heads back to Loot Village. His goal is to protect them, not really handle the main boss, and if the main boss isn't dead by the time, well, they're done cleaning up Loot Village, then he'll probably head over and help with the main boss as well. This will give him a good idea of how strong these waves are, because obviously at this moment, he has no clue by any means. He doesn't really know if the waves are extremely powerful or actually extremely weak. He hasn't had a clue by any means, only based on the people that he's seen so far, or the monsters he's seen so far. So when the wave begins, he begins to fight off monster after monster, being that of these zombies and like skeleton-like monsters, and same thing with these flying-like hornets. But it seems like those hornets, those monsters, those people, or those monsters in general, aren't much of a challenge. Naofumi destroys through them like it was nothing, and so does Rautalia, at least to a certain extent, only a couple of them. The stronger monsters, she really can't keep up too well, but she is gaining levels as they're fighting. And frankly, Naofumi is just summoning the power that he has from various games like Xenoverse and summoning people like Master Chief to basically just to have an assault of gunfire. This continues on, and frankly, he racks up a good amount of experience points from this, breaching the level 40. He actually sees that he could unlock 2 more games. That's kind of what the whole trend has been. Or he can actually use that experience to more or less inject that into the games he currently has. So he does just that. He wants to boost those levels, maybe focus on these about 6 games he currently has at the moment, and go from there. So he continues to boost those levels and continues to level them up as the wave is practically over. Well, it seems like they handled it. Good job, Raphtalia, and good job everybody else. Is everyone safe? I can get some healing potions and healing items if you need them. Everyone says that they're fine. It seems like they're completely unscratched. Even the people of Loot Village are happy that he did that, and they even don't want to take his payments anymore, because obviously he makes payments every month or every couple days, excuse me, stuff like that. But he says that it's fine. I mean, frankly, Naofumi has so much money, it doesn't even matter. He has literally an infinite money glitch. That's whatever. But he continues to just basically do his thing at Loot Village, helping people out and anything you can really think of. But at this point, he doesn't get invited to have a nice little state dinner. He doesn't get invited anywhere. But that would eventually come back on him when Motoyasu, Mine, and a bunch of guards show up at Loot Village. And they say that it's in basically the name of Motoyasu that this is now his village, but Naofumi says that's just not the case. He can't do that. He even looks at Motoyasu and tries to reason with him initially, saying that it's kind of messed up. You're raising taxes to the point that they won't be able to pay for it. So what's going on here? And Naofumi actually gets a response out of Motoyasu, something actually relatively modest, but Mine basically just shuts it down. Saying that Naofumi isn't a real hero and that he can't even have a say in any of this. And he says that she can say whatever she wants, but at the end of the day, he protected this village and he's not going to just let them take it over, and that it just can't happen that way. She looks at Motoyasu, but Motoyasu actually doesn't really have an intention at fighting Naofumi. Frankly, they have no ill will toward each other. They're relatively nice to each other. Naofumi's been kind of out of the picture doing his own thing, and Motoyasu doesn't see a problem with Naofumi. Maybe this will be a problem for Mine, and she might need to try to manipulate a story around him. But just as she's about to say another word, a shadow shows up with this odd-looking paper. It seems like a scroll, and it says something about basically not being able to do what she's about to do. Frankly, Mine is frustrated by this, and Naofumi can see by the look on her face, forcing her to eventually leave. They don't even challenge Naofumi in any way, and Motoyasu weirdly apologizes to Naofumi. And at least Naofumi is glad that they're on good terms. Hopefully it would stay this way. Naofumi eventually would begin to talk to Raphtalia about exploring a bit more. Maybe it'd be good for them to actually head out. He then summons something from a video game. He actually summons a Nimbus. A Nimbus that basically, if you're not good, you won't be able to ride it, but since Naofumi and Raphtalia are pure good, it's completely fine. So they hop on the Nimbus and begin flying off to actually search for more villages. During their travels, they do come across a man that's kind of trotting down the road and kind of tired. They also come across someone else deeper in the distance, but they decide to help this man first. It seems like this man is actually trying to bring this medicine for his grandmother. So Naofumi quickly takes him to his grandmother, giving her the medicine, and basically it seems to work, sort of. But Naofumi also comes up with his own medicine, giving it to her, and she stands up like she's basically been hit with a magic wand that has made her 50 times stronger. Naofumi gives her basically this medicine and she's back to her old self. She's shocked, thanking him profusely about it, and he says that it's truly no problem, but he needs to head off. So him and Raphtalia head off again to see another man, the same man that they saw further down the line, being harassed by a bunch of bandits. He begins to say that he'll give as much money as they want just to leave him alive, but they say that they have other things in mind. But Naofumi and Raphtalia immediately go down there and say that that isn't the best idea, that they should really back off, frankly. Naofumi then immediately, his hair begins to slightly stand up, as if the wind beneath him begins to pick up, and he's slightly able to hover and fly forward. You might be thinking, why isn't he flying like normal? Why would he use the Nimbus to fly then? But he doesn't have the best of control. Even with adding boosts to the Xenoverse game and other games like that from his last 10 levels of level up, he still seems to be not in complete control over that state. But he's able to punch people, and when he punches people, it hurts bad. Like, strong enough that if he doesn't pull his punch, it'd probably put a hole in their stomach. Nonetheless, he completely defeats all of them, defeating most, if not all, of the bandits swiftly, and Rautalia finishes the rest off, and they're out cold on the ground. He ties them up really quick and just kind of leaves them there, and he tells the man, or asks the man, where he's headed. So he takes the man exactly where they're going, or where he wants to go, and the man begins to say that he can teach Naofumi so many different things about how to make money, about trading, but Naofumi says that he's already the richest man in this world, and to not really worry. And obviously the man is confused. What is he talking about? How are you just the richest man in the world without knowing any trade tactics, without any of that? In which Naofumi's kind of just like, well, I can't really tell you that. That's kind of a secret. So, nonetheless, Naofumi continues on, but the man actually insists on giving him some information in terms of missions. Naofumi says that he doesn't mind. He'll definitely take some missions because he wants to help as many people as possible, leading to him, first off, getting a mission to go check out this odd-looking plant. Supposedly there's these plants that are overgrown and are basically attacking the citizens of their village, so Naofumi is tasked to go check that out relatively quickly. When he arrives, he sees this giant plant, and he realizes how bad the state is currently. He heads over to check out more or less what's going on, and he asks the villagers. He's only been given a small herbicide, but the villagers give him some important information about where the plant has come from, which is basically from the Spear Hero or Multiasu, and Naofumi learns that they are extremely reckless. These heroes, or other heroes that he's currently dealing with, are extremely reckless to the point that they can put other people in danger, the same people they're trying to prevent or trying to not hurt. Naofumi says that this herbicide is probably too weak, but he can actually enhance it. Rautalia is confused, and he says that he did have another game that he unlocked, and it was kind of a childhood game just because he felt that it might have been good for food production, but he guesses this is probably a good time to reveal it as well. And that game, ironically enough, is Stardew Valley, and he says that it can be configured a little bit in the game settings, that he can actually make this herbicide a lot stronger, dealing with various different plants. And since most of these games have mods in a technical sense in terms of coding, he could actually regulate it so that the herbicide will kill this plant more or less instantaneously. But he'll probably have to plant his own seeds here and actually start a big growth pattern, because if he doesn't, then the terrain will probably die out. Rautalia says, or asks if it's a risk, but Naofumi says that it's not that big of a risk, frankly, and it's a bigger risk keeping these things around. So obviously he gets rid of them using that advanced herbicide, and he begins planting more and more plants nearby the village, so that the village can have a constant food supply no matter what. Naofumi continues just tampering with the food supply a little bit after a little bit, just so they can basically have a really good food supply for a long time, telling them exactly how to monitor it and also various ways to actually make it better. They're thankful for everything, and Naofumi leaves them some special items that would help them in that little bit of crop maintaining, and Naofumi begins to head off to their next mission. Obviously, he doesn't need the money for this, but it's good basically visiting different places to help them out. He also then brings a delivery to this weird hot spring spa thing. It's good for him and Rautalia just to relax. So that was a plus. It was more like a vacation day than anything, though, because he wasn't really helping many people. It was just straight up delivering a package. Until he gets signals that a nearby village is actually going through a plague. So Naofumi heads over there. His whole intention is kind of just to like purify the air. That was kind of the idea when he heads over there. Maybe make a temporary glass dome over the village so that they can get some oxygen filtration and stuff like that. But when he arrives there, he begins to work on that after talking to some of the villagers, but they actually tell him that above is actually where the whole problem is. The problem is that there's this dragon that is currently up on the hill and on the mountain that is causing a good bit of trouble. that dragon is actually causing this plague. Naofumi asks about it and questions why would the dragon cause the plague, and is it dead? In which they say yes, and that the sword hero Ren actually killed it, but didn't dispose of it. Naofumi, hearing this, is kind of annoyed, but says that he will dispose of it and it shouldn't be too difficult. But before that, he gives them temporary medicine that would completely nullify the sickness, and also makes that glass dome he was talking about, at least for now. Then he'll tear it down after, using some of his video game powers, and then obviously everything should be pretty good after that. He heads up the mountain, and when he does, and when he arrives, he begins to look around and sees the dragon laid out on the floor. He begins to walk over to the dragon and says to Raphtalia that they'll just need to cut it up, put it away, and they should have some storage bins that will basically make this a lot easier. Something called an ender chest. It's kind of odd how it works, and same thing with all just regular chests, but at least in an ender chest he can put it in, or put in the dragon pieces, and it seems like it will kind of just more or less poof out of existence, like recycling. Like some weird advanced recycling, sort of. He then begins to actually chop the dragon up, chopping at its tail, but just as Naofumi chops at its tail, the dragon reawakens. Coming alive, the dragon wants a fight. Naofumi looks on in complete shock and isn't able to react quick enough and gets hit by the leftover part of the dragon's tail, sending him flying. Raphtalia sees Naofumi go flying and she jumps after him to grab him, but Naofumi has multiple broken ribs. With the dragon overhead looming, they're not sure what they're going to do. The dragon looks at both of them and is about to end their lives, going to breathe fire entirely on Naofumi and also Raphtalia. Naofumi picks up his controller though and begins to click buttons in hopes that he can find something to combat this. But as he's doing this, a giant flame begins to get blasted at Naofumi and Raphtalia. They're entirely consumed, and the entire area seems to be with fire and smoke. All the people, the villagers below, are concerned, seeing the giant fire blast, and they can't tell if Naofumi and Raphtalia are still alive. The fire then arrives, but just as soon as it consumes Naofumi, it begins to disappear. It begins to go away entirely. It seems as if something is absorbing it. And then eventually protection arrives all around Naofumi and Raphtalia, protecting them entirely. He looks to see Mortal Kombat characters, Halo characters, anything you can think of in front of him. Even characters from some of the strongest video games out there. Some of the strongest he's ever played in his life. He has video game characters that are from basically other comics, movies, things like this. He has Dragon Ball characters standing in front of him, protecting him, and all of the fire gets blown away, and an entire army surrounds the dragon. It seems that Naofumi himself was restricting all of his capabilities, and he wasn't letting loose everything that he was truly capable of. He realizes this, and he begins to think, imagine, try to manipulate anything he can possibly think of, and his fear of Raphtalia and him dying right there was exactly what was needed to make the catalyst to turn him into an even stronger hero, as all of them surround the dragon and begin their assault. With an army of video game characters around Naofumi, they begin to charge at the dragon. Every time the dragon tries to breathe fire, do anything, tries to strike at these video game characters, nothing occurs. Their strength is equivalent to Naofumi's, but in a way even stronger. Naofumi himself was never a person that is insanely strong. He's insanely strong because of anything that he can do. He's as if he was some simple mage that can actually power boost people around him. He's more or less that. He makes others strong. He makes these characters that are strong. He makes these people that are strong. He alone does not have brute strength. That's why when he tried to adapt himself personally to Xenoverse and basically adapt him to various different video games, he wasn't at a level of insane and crazy amounts of strength. That's just not how his weapon works. So as he watches every single one of those video game characters rip apart the dragon, he realizes that he needs them as much as they need him. They rip apart that dragon, destroying it entirely, and even ripping out a shard that lies within him, and then completely eviscerates the body so that the plague over the village is no longer there. Bringing the gem back to Naofumi, all of the characters disappear in an instant, and Naofumi drops to one knee, staggered, extremely bad, and insanely tired. Naofumi struggles to his feet as he summons one last character, a character that would allow him to at least move away and more or less travel without having to do anything outlandish. It's a character from actually Ark Survival. It seems like it's a dinosaur-like creature that will carry Raphtalia and him back to the place that they once were, or at least the original place, which is Melromark. They begin to head back over there, and he's half asleep on this dinosaur. As they're heading back, they both run into someone by the name of Melty. And Raphtalia, making an executive decision for both of them, decides to take her back to the kingdom as she wishes. When they arrive back at the kingdom, Naofumi is completely and entirely exhausted, but just as they're arriving, someone comes out of nowhere and tries to fight. Raphtalia jumps in front and is able to parry the weapon slightly, but of course she's nowhere near as strong as the spear hero himself. Naofumi tries to get up and tries to even have the dinosaur attack the spear hero Multiyasu, but seems like he's reluctant in a way. Not because he doesn't want to, but because he lacks the strength, at least right now, to do so. It seems whatever power he used before and him releasing all of those video game characters, it completely and utterly drained him. Multiyasu basically questions Naofumi with everything he's done. He's heard rumors from mine that he's done this or done that, but of course none of these are true. Melty stepping in quicker than usual, stopping the entirety of what's going on, and then eventually explaining that her sister is mine, and that she's other known as Melromark, and that she is extremely toxic, and there's a reason why she's not next in line for the throne as the queen. Immediately, Naofumi is shocked, but of course he's not really talking too much at this point. Raphtalia insists that they need to get him just to somewhere that they can rest, so they begin to head over to Loot Village and their home. Of course, Melty wants to follow, and actually asks a bunch of questions about what occurred and so on and so forth. And of course he just says it straight up, exactly what occurred, and that everything he's been doing, kind of cleaning up the messes of all these other people, and that he, admittedly enough, overestimated himself. Thought that he could handle a ton of things at once, but he realizes now that it's not as simple as he thought it was in the past. That dragon gave him a rude awakening. That he might have been able to beat it quote-unquote easily, but it wasn't because he personally was extremely strong. It wasn't because he could step up to the plate and obliterate the dragon himself. No, that's actually not the case. It's because he fluked out. He made a massive mistake, overestimated himself and his party members, frankly, and had to basically win on a fluke. Him releasing all of those characters at once drained him entirely, and yes, it is something to think about in terms of his power, but now he knows. He can't rely just on himself, that he personally was being too cocky in his own little way. He may not be as bad as these other heroes, leaving dead bodies to rot or stuff like that, but still, he is extremely bad. Nonetheless, he heads back to his little home that he's made at Loot Village, rests up for a bit, and then heads to the Dragon Hourglass to see if they can actually get a class upgrade. But when they arrive, it seems like they refuse the class upgrade of Raphtalia, even though he is one of the heroes, but saying that they can only serve the sword, the spear, and also the bow. In complete frustration, Naofumi leaves with Raphtalia once again, and they begin scouting out various villages, eventually coming across a village that isn't really a village? They're confused for a second, but they realize that it's a refugee camp from a different country. It seems like they're begging for food and asking for help, Naofumi being able to give just that, making it so that the land all around is basically able to produce food extremely well, and he just gives them food straight out. And of course, this does hurt his stamina a little bit. He's doing a lot of stuff before this next wave is going to happen. But nonetheless, he helps them out, and he's able to think that he's helped these people to a certain extent. But he is frustrated. Right when he hears how this occurred, it was Itsuki, the bow hero. The bow hero made it so that they were forced into this situation. And not only that, it's because he basically took out a tyrannical ruler and just put in another corrupt one. He is frustrated about this. Naofumi is livid and begins to realize that he was even kind of too hard on himself. He himself was saying that maybe he didn't do a good enough job. He was taking things too lightly. But these people are on a new level. They're taking things so lightly to the fact that they're really hurting a ton of people. So when he heads back to this bar-like place, he sees Ren and also Itsuki, speaking with them and talking to them about exactly what occurred and what he saw, talking about the dragon and how Ren didn't dispose of it, and that this is very similar to real life. If you don't dispose of a giant corpse or something that is moldy, disgusting, and rotting, this is what occurs. It causes a plague, it causes something gross, and gives sickness. Same thing with Itsuki. You knock out a government that is corrupt just to put in another corrupt government? That doesn't make sense. So Naofumi explains this to them thoroughly, and to a certain extent they believe him and they agree. Of course, they don't have any ill will to Naofumi at this moment, and maybe they won't ever. But nonetheless, Naofumi just is frustrated with the outcome of all of this and what occurred. But with that said, he can't really dwell on it much more. With the next wave coming along in the next 12 or so hours, he needs to get on top of his game and get ready to protect whatever he can. So he decides. He personally knows that he cannot fight a wave on his own, so he begins to set different video game characters all around. Video game characters that from his favorite games alike. Some like Mario, Luigi, others like Scorpion and Sub-Zero and Smoke and different characters like that. He continues to place them all around in different villages so that they can protect. He realizes that his stamina slowly but surely is getting lower and lower, but he realizes that the more he does this, the more he's going to get used to it. It's as if you're running around, you're working out, you're punching a heavy bag, anything. The more you do it, the more accustomed you are going to be to it. So that's exactly what he's going to do, and this is the approach he wants to take. Yes, levels matter. Yes, technique matters. All of that matters, but endurance matters as well. Stamina, and being able to realize that you will get tired eventually. So he wants to put that into act right now, and even if he can't personally defeat anything, which he should be able to theoretically, he at least has people that can all around. Just as he's thinking about this, he realizes something in his leveling system, and it has to do with Raphtalia. It seems like Raphtalia is connected to him in a way that is perfect for his video game like hero. He then pats her on the shoulder and she asks what's going on. Just as she asks this, armor begins to basically rise all around her, and she gets a massive sword that feels as if it were light as a feather. Raphtalia is confused about how this even happened and even tries to say that she should give this to Naofumi, that Naofumi needs it, but Naofumi shakes his head and says that he realizes that he personally needs to support everybody else first, and then he can go about it in this way. Raphtalia is shocked. It's some armor that he's basically used in World of Warcraft before, but let's just say it boosts her stats a large amount, being arguably even stronger than Naofumi himself. But like I said, Naofumi isn't really a person with pure strength. In the large scheme of things, Naofumi would be stronger than Raphtalia, but if they went one-on-one right now, there's an argument to be made that Raphtalia would literally kill him. Would she actually do that? Of course not, because it's Raphtalia. But nonetheless, the wave is upon them. The clouds begin to change and the sky begins to turn purple, and the protection of Loot Village seems to be flawless, actually making it so Naofumi and Raphtalia feel the need to actually help out the other heroes sooner rather than later. They head to the main boss to see that no progress has been made by any means. They begin to realize that the Flying Dutchman and the shadow beneath him is actually the key. Naofumi points this out. Raphtalia goes and dashes in as quick as possible, stabbing into it as a Soul Eater shows up. Naofumi immediately begins to use his his controller, trying to summon one more character to actually assist in this battle. And when he does, and one arrives, it's somehow a ghost itself, a character, no, a Pokemon, other known as Gengar, stands right next to Naofumi as it begins to attack the Soul Eater that has just been summoned. Raphtalia also helps, and let's just say the other heroes are in complete shock at Naofumi using this weird looking creature. And they begin to think, is Naofumi connected to the waves? Is Naofumi summoning the waves? Maybe he's using the power of the waves to do these certain things. Look at that monster. It looks so similar to basically a boss in the wave. Of course, they have no clue what they're talking about. Literally, absolutely zero. But nonetheless, they are coming to their own conclusions. After the first Soul Eater is defeated and the second one arrives, they're about to take that one out too. But just as that one is about to get taken out by Raphtalia, it seems like someone else takes it out quicker than imaginably possible. And that is a woman with a black kimono with two twin-bladed warfans by the name of Glass. Glass has arrived on the battlefield and introduces herself relatively quickly and begins to just defeat and or basically threaten the other heroes. Let's just say that the Soul Eater is dead in an instant, the other heroes couldn't do a thing, and now it's up to Naofumi to defeat this character, to defeat this person. He realizes that there is going to be a ton of sacrifice in this fight, and he tells Raphtalia to make sure to play and fight around Gengar. It seems as if Gengar does have some sort of draining technique, and their goal is to at least subdue her. They have no idea how strong she actually is, and maybe, or maybe not, maybe Naofumi can overwhelm her, or maybe she'll just overwhelm him. Nonetheless, the fight rages on, and Raphtalia can keep up to a certain extent, especially with the help of Gengar. Maybe they even have her on the back foot. The goal is to basically put her to sleep. If they can make her fall asleep using some of Gengar's techniques, then they can actually capitalize on any strike they have afterwards, and they're able to do just that. Gengar is able to put Glass to sleep, and eventually begins to use something other known as Dream Eater. But in this case, Dream Eater is actually not hurting Glass, but actually just draining her of her SP, immediately draining her more and more and more, and eventually when she wakes up, she feels extremely weak. Naofumi walks over and even points a blade at her neck and tells her and asks her what exactly she wants. She pushes the blade away and kind of backs up, but stumbles a bit, telling all three of them that they all need to die, that the heroes need to die so that their world can be safe. In an instant, almost a split second, Glass is gone. She jumps through the wave, knowing that she cannot win this fight at the moment. She knows that there are limitations here, and that she has a great deal of them, so she leaves, hoping that next time she comes around that she can finish off what she started and hopefully, or maybe, save her world. Naofumi is then scolded by all of them. Why didn't you kill her? Why didn't you finish the job? Naofumi shrugs and says that maybe there was a reason why she was holding back, why she didn't kill all three of them immediately. She knew they weren't a threat, only he was. But nonetheless, they just head off back to the kingdom. But the only problem is, Motoyasu has already been confused and talking to Mine, and the king is under the assumption that somehow Naofumi has this odd creature that looks vaguely familiar to something from the wave. That maybe a creature like this is from the wave, and that he is controlling them. And immediately Naofumi shakes this off, saying that that's ridiculous, that he'd never do something like that. Why would he? Naofumi is then basically approached by guard after guard, and they're going to put him in shackles. Raphtalia tells them to stop this at this once, and telling them all that they will regret trying to put hands on Naofumi. Naofumi tells her to calm down, that it's okay, but Raphtalia refuses that, immediately breaking free, or allowing Naofumi to break free and grabbing Naofumi and jumping out a window. Being able to leave and basically head out as quick as possible, she tells Naofumi to summon something, but she forgets that Naofumi does have some powers himself, and he picks her up and begins to fly off. Naofumi heads to their small little abode, at least for the time being, until they have to leave sooner rather than later. But Naofumi tells her that everything would be okay, but Raphtalia says that these people are not nice people, and it's so obvious. She knows that Naofumi wants to be a good person, help as many people as possible, but this isn't the way. Just as they're saying this, someone approaches the house. He thinks that it's an intruder, but when she enters, it's just a shadow that says that she has nothing wrong with Naofumi, and gives him a small pendant, telling him that he will know exactly what to do with this and who is responsible. And on top of that, the queen wants to speak with him. Naofumi realizes that this is his quote-unquote next mission, that he needs to go see the queen, speak with her about whatever's going on, and also get her Raphtalia a class upgrade. Yes, her stats are extremely higher, but imagine if she got a class upgrade. She'd be that much stronger. So Naofumi and Raphtalia begin to leave, and secretly leave at night. But just as they're leaving, he hears a couple people and a softer voice. It's Melty. Melty walks up and asks for Naofumi to please come back to the kingdom, and that they can speak about this. She knows that he's not doing any of those things, and Naofumi says that that's not a good idea, that just smells like a trap, and that whatever he told her, or whatever frankly you're telling Naofumi, is just flat out going to be a setup. Naofumi says that it's time for them to go, but as Naofumi goes to leave and about to fly off, Melty runs after him and asks for him not to do this, that to please listen. But just as she's saying this, a sword is about to get plunged right through her chest. And just as Naofumi is about to react to this, well, that sword goes right through her chest, killing Melty instantaneously. Naofumi grabs the body and tries to bring her back. Melty is completely gone. Her eyes are completely blanked out as if she didn't exist, and Naofumi is trying to resuscitate her, trying to get her back to herself. But unfortunately, that's not the case. That's on the bridge of impossible. But just as Naofumi looks up and sees an army headed toward him, he tells Raphtalia that they need to go, grabbing her on the waist and picking her up, and then flying off with Melty and her lifeless body as well. Naofumi knows that he must go straight to the queen, and hopes, and absolutely hopes, that he can find a way to somehow bring the queen's little daughter back to life. With the death of Melty, with the death of the young daughter, obviously Naofumi would feel remorseful, but he knew that his powers were far better than anything he's ever seen, and eventually he'd dig through his bag of tricks, and he would be able to do just what he thought. He'd be able to revive Melty. It seems as if his powers have given him a sense of less danger in terms of, well, death itself. And luckily he's able to bring her back to life as if nothing occurred. He doesn't bring this up by any means, and would not want to bring this up to either the queen or obviously Melty herself. He just wants to make it very apparent that there was an assassination attempt. Him and Raphtalia take off flying away in hopes to find one person, and that's the queen, asking Melty where the queen currently is, and he gets the exact directions of where to go. When they arrive, he greets the queen as proper as he possibly can, saying that whoever it is, and he doesn't know who, or can kind of make a guess at least, at who is trying to kill Melty, they need to be stopped. And it all connects back to this small little emblem. The queen is shocked to see that it's the Three Heroes Church emblem, and believes that the church must have something to do with it, and she's even been hearing through her shadows that the church and also the king and her daughter, not the youngest one, but the other one by the name of Malty, is currently in cahoots with the church, more or less making it extremely hard for the heroes, and eventually going to lead to major catastrophe for the heroes themselves. So Naofumi needs to do something about it. Naofumi needs to stop it. So him and Raphtalia leave Melty there, and she obviously argues and disputes this, but Naofumi knows that she cannot be with them, not right now. They take off and head toward where the church is currently setting up their plans, and the final battle between the church, or the Pope, and Naofumi. the legendary gamer hero, is about to begin. Naofumi flies over and sees the followers of all of the church. The Pope is standing there shouting to all of them, saying that the day of reckoning is now, that they will finally have the power they deserve, and they will finally bring peace to this world. Naofumi sees this and begins to focus all his energy. He summons something. No, it doesn't look like he summoned anything at all, but it just looks like sort of as if it was some sort of mist of anything. And Rautalia questions what's going on, and Naofumi says that he's preparing a barrier to capture all of them at once, and he's going to focus all his energy into that. He begins putting up this barrier, getting a ton, and when I mean a ton, of the followers completely encapsulated within this barrier. The Pope realizes it, and luckily him and about maybe 100 to 200 followers are able to escape, but the mass majority of the followers pass out and they're stuck in the barrier, not able to help the Pope at all. The Pope immediately looks at Naofumi and tells his followers to give him all the power they possibly can using the magic they have left. The followers though know that this means that they'll literally die. Any energy that they can give right now will be too minuscule if they try to sparingly use it, but if they all use their entire life force, they should be able to give one blast that should be able to take out Naofumi, the quote-unquote stronger of all of the other heroes. At least that's what they've heard. So they begin to pump all of their magic within this odd-looking weapon, a weapon that is built of a replica of all 4 of the original Cardinal Heroes weapons. Immediately, the Pope blasted at Naofumi. Rautalia stands in front though, as armor begins to surround her once again, and her sword begins to change, extending as she slices into the blast, and in an instant, it's sliced in half. Naofumi knows that his power is limited, and he's gone through this many of times, that he needs to trust the people around him and the people that he basically can quote-unquote control to do the battles for him, and that he needs to set them up for success. So Naofumi begins to summon character after character, and they begin to attack the Pope sapping the last bit of energy from the rest of his followers, killing all of the rest of them. They're all dead, at least the ones that are coherent enough to give him that said energy or life force, and basically the Pope was minimalized to nothing in a matter of seconds. The Pope was able to be detained relatively quickly by Naofumi knowing how to use his powers properly. Now he knows that his strength isn't within himself, it's within all the others around him and the others that he can currently make. Nonetheless, the Pope is luckily detained, and the Queen is basically sighing in relief. Now she won't have to deal with the church and basically this whole idea that her daughter and also the king were trying to not only kill the youngest daughter, but also basically kill the rest of the heroes. Nonetheless though, he begins to speak with the queen about what occurred, and an army is swept through there, picking up all of the leftover rubble, you could call it, and or trash. And the interrogation of the king and Malti, or as we know her as Mine, begins. They begin interrogating her, asking them tons and tons of questions about more or less anything you can think of, putting slave crests on their chests to make sure that they never lie. Malti begins to lie over and over again, and the queen, as a statement, wants to sentence them to death. But Naofumi thinks otherwise. Naofumi says that death is too good for them, and frankly he knows that she wouldn't want to put her own children or her own child and her husband to death, so they don't need to do that. Naofumi says that all he wants, and to make everything far more convenient, all he wants is that they don't get in the way anymore, that she becomes more of a vital role with all of it going on, and Mine not be allowed to be an adventurer for at least a small time being. That she should not be allowed to be part of or she should be stripped of her royal status, and so should the king. Immediately the queen accepts this and says that's completely fine, and out of good faith decides to throw a nice party for Naofumi and the 3 heroes. Naofumi also wants to have a meeting with the other 3 heroes to make it basically apparent that he wants them to stay on track, that they need to be able to focus and not let their own egos get in the way of what's basically the main goal of everything going on. And that meeting eventually happens, the 4 hero meeting with obviously all the heroes, is relatively quick. They speak about how they leveled so quickly and they give away all their little secrets, but of course they have their little arguments. Naofumi shuts them down immediately, saying that they need to focus on the task at hand, that they need to stop taking this like as if it was a video game. And he even says it's ironic for him to say that when his power is literally based off of video games. But nonetheless, they need to focus up, that there's no reason to be bickering with each other, that they should be focusing on the problem out there. But then they bring up the fact that Naofumi is guilty of this too. And Naofumi says of course he is. He's allowed people, or allowed Glass more specifically, to leave without repercussion, and that he shouldn't have done that. Maybe he should have ended her life there, but he felt that giving her a chance was the better idea. And that's what he did, and that's the decision they're going to have to live with. And eventually, and as we know, that decision will be tested once again. Well, the queen then says that since they have that all done and ready to go, she wants to tell them about Calmira, an archipelago event that will give them bonus experience points, and that they can all head over and begin their extensive amounts of training. Naofumi says that he'll head over as soon as possible and in the morning, in which the queen says that they could just take a ship, but Naofumi can literally fly or summon something that can fly, so they might as well just head over early and they'll outpace a ship relatively easily. So once they have their anything or everything in manner, basically having their class upgrades or just anything they need to get, so item wise and stuff like that, all basically functional, they head off to Calmira. When they arrive, they begin their training. The training is relatively simple. They just want to power level as much as possible, and frankly, it's pretty easy when you have the power you have. But it's odd. It seems they're getting more XP than usual, and Naofumi realizes that he has left some characters or some people around the area, or not in Calmira obviously, but in the other parts of Melromark. And he realizes that it seems there's some conflict going on over there, and he hopes that those characters should be able to defeat whatever's going on, and he can even check in on them by basically just looking at his digital screen, more or less. And it seems that they handled it, so he's not so sure what even occurred, but maybe that's some information he should probably get later on. Nonetheless, they continue training more and more, and eventually they get two people wanting to join them. Both, one by the name of Therese and other by the name of Lark, and Naofumi is nice as usual, being super nice, and so is Raphtalia, being friendly as always, and they are friendly back and forth. And Therese and Lark are even kind of staring at Naofumi, oddly enough, just staring at him, wondering what's wrong with this guy, like what would make him bad, in which he is kind of confused at their weird glances, but nonetheless continues on with his leveling and his power leveling, gaining more video games to unlock, and frankly more power. They're extremely strong at this point. Their training is going to be far more efficient than ever before, so they decide they're going to take a day off. Him and Raphtalia are just hanging out on the beach, and eventually he actually sees something in the water. It seems like one of the video games has given him more sensory or better sensory things, basically like better eyesight, better hearing, stuff like that. And he sees this odd looking temple. He goes down, and with Raphtalia eventually finding out that it's a dragon hourglass and that there is a wave bound for Calmira in only 24 hours. And Naofumi immediately tells the queen, and they get ships ready to go immediately. Ships are all waiting for the wave to begin after the 24 hours have concluded. The other heroes are waiting as well, and the plan is for the main heroes to just fight the main boss, eliminate it, and then handle their business. But expecting Glass is an understatement. They're expecting not only Glass, but maybe even more people that are powerful. So Naofumi is waiting, and then finally the skies change. The skies turn that vintage purple and that cloudy, dusty form, and it seems as if these monsters are all fish-like monsters with one giant main boss that is some basically giant fish of some sorts. Immediately, the other heroes attack the fish, and they're actually able to do substantial damage to the fish. This time around, they're actually not as weak as they would be in canon because of Naofumi's regard and basically him being on them all the time about taking this world seriously. So they are, we'll say, slightly more helpful. Nonetheless, Naofumi sends out something that can basically defeat that monster, and it's this little pink mouse looking creature that everyone is confused about that shoots a giant thunderbolt and huge thundercloud over this giant fish, defeating it and frying it from the inside out. And Naofumi shrugs, basically saying that they have extra food now, I guess for like the next couple months. Naofumi laughs about this, but the sky doesn't change. Naofumi slightly expected this and begins to hover over toward the fish and lands on it as he inspects it, maybe thinking that another monster would come out. But nope, just as he thought, maybe glass would arrive again. He looks up, and no. Lark and Therese were standing in front of him though, and everything connects back together, and the other heroes get ready for a fight as well. Naofumi shakes his head. "You're with glass, huh?" They say they apologize and that they have to kill him, that this is just part of the deal in terms of this world, that if their world survives, that their world, or if Naofumi's world survives, then their world will not survive. Naofumi basically argues with this, that there has to be another way, that he should be able to help, that if they can transfer from one world to another so easily, who says that he can't go over there and save whatever's going on, whatever is occurring? Maybe they can all work in unison to save their worlds. And Naofumi just tries to tell them all of this, tries to tell them everything. And funny enough, Lark and Therese immediately believe them, as if Naofumi can definitely help, can definitely do everything that he's saying. And you want to know why? Because one of Naofumi's skills, or basically video games, is a video game that is very similar to an RPG that he has, but it has a skill that is more or less built for convincing. And Naofumi has a maxed out skill in that, and thought that it would come in handy when just bargaining with people, and this is some sort of bargaining. So he was actually able to tone down everything almost instantaneously, and it seems like Lark and Therese are on board with the idea, and they even tell Glass this. Naofumi lets them leave, and the other heroes argue with that idea, but Naofumi says that they'll be just fine and to not worry about it, in which the other heroes immediately nod their heads and say that they believe him. Wow, this is definitely a weird skill. It's kind of making me uncomfortable now. Naofumi looks around and kind of just scratches the back of his head and deactivates his skill for the time being. He walks away, and immediately the queen says that he did a great job. She's not sure how he did it, but they just left. And Naofumi shrugs and says that he has no comment on that regard and to not really worry about it. In which the queen says that a reward is still in plan for him and that he should definitely accept it, leading to him obviously getting the lordsmanship over Rautalia's village and more or less cleaning up and helping out multitudes of demi-humans and finally creating a safe haven. But here's the thing, this doesn't mean it's over. He's going to now have to help another world, and there's more catastrophes that will soon come. But how will he defeat them? Well, we can all guess how. Naofumi is extremely powerful, and maybe that spirit tortoise won't be so difficult. Maybe going to that second world and helping out everyone else won't be that difficult. Nonetheless, that's a story for another time, and not for this story specifically. So if you enjoyed, I hope you did, leave a like, sub, and comment down below. And this is the end of What If Naofumi Was the Legendary Gamer Hero. I know some of you might be like, well, that was kind of like a weird way to end it in terms of like the fight. I just thought it would be funny because I know there's a lot of people. I think somebody even commented that there's literally games that have that, and I know there is. I'm pretty sure it's either Skyrim or another game that has a stat for bargaining. So I kind of wanted to do it and have it end in that way. I thought it would have been a funny way. And nonetheless, I hope you all enjoyed. Obviously, this was more of like a gag what if than anything. I mean, when you're a gamer hero, that's kind of overpowered. There's no like balancing that. Like I tried, but I was like, whatever, I'm just gonna let loose OP, whatever. And but I thought it was fun. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope all of y'all have an amazing day. And yeah, later.
I don't wanna waste what's left.